Hey guys, welcome back to Star Wars Timeline. My name is Ben, and today I'm absolutely honored to present an artist who honestly needs no introduction, a master illustrator. His work is celebrated around the world. Mr. Greg, please introduce yourself and tell the audience who may not know who you are about your body of work.
Hi, I'm Greg Hildebrandt. I've been basically doing art professionally since I was 18, and that's 1958. And I've worked in film, I've worked in animation, I've done documentary live films, I've done illustrations for children's books, and then with my twin brother.
Mhm.
And when I we got a global fan following when we illustrated The Lord of the Rings for Ballantine Books in the mid 70s, 76, 77, and 78.
Mhm.
And that gave us a fandom. And right towards the end of that third calendar, I started my own project with Tim Urshak, which is a fantasy novel that Bantam published.
Mhm.
And at that time, I had started our project. We had started our project. I got a call from a studio in New York City, a film poster studio. They were in a panic. They needed a poster for a film that was about to come out in a week. And they said there's already an existing poster that the director was not entirely satisfied with yet, and could we come in and help them out? Because came through for them once before on a project for Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein, which
Yeah.
we did a painting overnight, which never got used. But so we went in, and it was a Star Wars poster that we went in to work on. Tom Young
Mhm.
had done the original poster,
That's right.
and we looked at the poster. We said, well, what do you want us to do? And they said the director wants a poster more comic booky. It was the only directive they gave us.
Mhm.
So they gave us a bunch of photos out of the movie, the Tom Young poster. We kept the same set. They said keep the same setup that Tom had come up with, but now make it more comic booky. And that was our only directive. So we went on the train. We live in Jersey, and we were analyzing what would that mean, more comic booky. And we went through it.
Right.
Are they talking ink outline with flat colors? Because
Yeah.
that was what comic books were colored like. It looked like back then in the 70s,
Mhm.
before sophisticated computer coloring. And we said, no, they don't want that. What could this be? We figured by the end of the trip, when we got home, was more color contrast. Tom
Mhm.
Young's poster is pretty muted. It's very subtle.
That's correct.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just
Mhm.
very subtle. And we figured, well, he wants it more punchy. Give it more contrast with the cool light that we ended up with, all the blue and Darth Vader in the background, and then the two principal figures in the foreground lit with the sword with a very warm light.
Yeah.
So you get that warm and cool contrast. And so that's what we did.
Yeah.
And
I definitely want to touch more in detail, techniques and execution of art. But if you don't mind, I wanted to track back just a little bit, rewind back,
Yeah.
and we talk about the younger version of Mr. Greg. I always am curious what sparks people's imagination. And I wanted to ask, what were some of your favorite fantasy or sci-fi heroes when you were a kid?
Well, I mean, I was born in 1939. So Tim and I both, the first things that I can remember artistically in this genre was the comic strips, the daily and Sunday comic. You got to remember, the comic page in the 1940s, while I was growing up,
Mhm.
was masterful art. I mean, it was incredible, elaborate.
The
Prince
Golden
Valiant
Age
by
era,
Hal,
right? Mhm.
Golden Age with Prince
Mhm.
Valiant by Hal Foster.
Mhm.
You'd see a whole page of these beautiful drawings. Flash Gordon, Alex Raymond's Flash Gordon.
Mhm.
So I would say, as far as a space hero, it would have been Flash Gordon
Yeah.
and Buck Rogers also
Mhm.
at that same time. So, and then, but then again, as far as superheroes go, my main man was Superman.
Superman.
He was
Yeah.
the first superhero, right?
Mhm.
Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster created.
Mhm.
And also, but not only the comics, but there was a radio show on every day. And so as a kid, I'm in school with Tim, and we had to hurry up and get home because Superman was coming onto the radio. We'd run home,
Mhm.
turn the radio on. If I remember right, it was like a 15-minute show.
So those are
And
like radio dramas, right?
radio dramas, right?
Mhm.
Just And that's where a lot of the Superman mythology got developed in the on radio.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were obsessed with that. I remember it so clearly. And then, I mean, you know, I'm picking up all the stuff, all the kids collect, all the guys in the neighborhood. That's what we had, is comic books. We collected and traded comic books.
Mm-hmm.
So you became aware of early stuff. Captain America was created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby
mm-hmm.
in 1941. Well, I was born in 39, so I didn't see that first issue until I got older, because
right.
there were older kids on the block
right.
who had those earlier issues. And when I saw Cap, that was it. He became one of the main guys also, along with Superman and Batman,
mm-hmm.
you know, and then Wonder Woman. So those are the main superheroes that I grew up with. Plus like I say, Milt Caniff's Terry and the Pirates, which
mm-hmm.
is a magnificent strip, and Tarzan, Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan. At the time, it was illustrated originally by Hal Foster. Then he did Prince Valiant,
mm-hmm.
and Vern Hogarth was the artist at the time that I became enamored with, as far as Tarzan was concerned. But these were all those initial superheroes that we were fans of. And then we would see the serials too. You know, they had these
mm-hmm.
chapters, and you'd go to the theater and you see Batman and Superman, and those were fantastic. So I was really taken by all that stuff. Plus all the Universal monster movies. Let's be honest, you know, Frankenstein and the Wolfman.
Yeah.
I also had, my parents were great readers, and they had a lot of great illustrated books.
Mm-hmm.
They loved art, and they had a bunch of N.C. Wyeth books. He was the master American illustrator,
mm-hmm.
who illustrated all the classics like Robin Hood and Treasure Island.
Yeah.
So those books had this. His characters, his figures were very almost powerful, superheroish in themselves,
mm-hmm.
you know, and very heroic, and almost Michelangelo-like, you know, in terms
yeah.
of the power and strength in his compositions and his lighting. So all this stewed together, and this is what all of our initial inspirations were.
And you know, when I was digging a little bit back, I worked for 13 plus years managing a local comic book store here in the Bronx.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And you know, when I was digging to the roots of it, the pre-comic era, also obviously the pulp magazines and pulp authors came about, and then we had, you know, Robert E. Howard and, you know, Edgar Rice Burroughs with his Martial Chronicles. And I, as somebody who grew up with Arnold Schwarzenegger film back in Russia as a kid, and I come over here to New York, and then you discover somebody like Robert E. Howard, who is more than just a pulpy author. He's like one of the great masters of short form fiction. And once you discover that, and it's so interesting for me when you are talking to a prolific writer, what brings that spark of imagination and makes them head in that direction. So my next question to you is, when did you know exactly, it's like, gee, I don't only want to look at this stuff, I want to paint. I want to be an artist myself.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because, I mean, the real exciting initial inspiration was at 5 years old, 6 years old. One of my cousins was having a birthday, and my mother and her two sisters with all the kids would always do some event. And this time we were going downtown Detroit. I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. We were going downtown Detroit, which is always a big deal. You're going downtown to one of the major theaters. I think it was the Michigan Theater. It's one of those fantastic Art Nouveau, Art Deco, Cecil B. DeMille set-looking theaters.
Wow.
And we were going there. I'd never been to a movie before. You remember, this is like 1945.
So you're like 6, 7 years
old.
What
did we see? Walt Disney's Pinocchio. That movie blew Tim and me away like nothing else in the world. I didn't know really what I was looking. There's this huge screen with all this artwork. I could see it was artwork.
Mm-hmm.
I knew, and it was moving. And I'm like, what is this?
And you were around 6, 7 years old then, right?
Yep.
Wow.
We were completely blown away. That would be the initial huge explosive spark, more like an atomic bomb going off, really.
Yeah.
And that was it. That we knew that was artwork, and we wanted to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then that mixed with all the, like I say, the daily and Sunday comic strips and comic books.
Mm-hmm.
So we started drawing our own comic books, and we were trying to analyze animation because there was no information back then.
Right.
Now, kids, everybody has access to every detail of everything.
Mm-hmm.
They hid all the information. There would be, because we got enamored with special effects in film also.
Hmm.
So, like the Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers serials, the
Right.
rockets and everything.
Hmm.
And we wanted to do it. And then, of course, Rocket Ship XM, the very first American sci-fi film,
Hmm.
1950. And we saw that. Then we saw George Pal's films, the Destination Moon and the
Hmm.
War of the Worlds. And we started trying to figure out how to do all that in animation as
Hmm.
kids, because you couldn't find it out. And we would go to the library constantly go in libraries,
Hmm.
digging up for information. And you'd find an article in a magazine somewhere on animation. And finally, we discovered this book in the library by Field, was his last, I forget his first name,
Hmm.
Field. And it was about, and it talked all about Disney animation, lots of examples. And we finally started to figure out, then we started making flip books. So maybe we were about 8 years old, 9 years old, and we started making our own flip books,
Hmm.
because I had big little books, the big little books, the little square books from the
Yes, I do. Yeah.
1930s.
Hmm.
Some of them would have animation in the corner, like The Shadow. I've got
Right,
several
right.
books now. You'd flip it and you see the shadow moving and shooting a gun and stuff.
Hmm.
And we would analyze that. Well, wait a minute, how does that go? It goes like this. There's a bunch of drawings that
Framing,
move
basically. You were figuring out
right.
framing.
So
Hmm.
figure out timing.
Hmm.
And then there was Preston Blair was an animator at Disney, worked on Fantasia
Hmm.
and other things. And he put a little paperback. It was a big paperback. I'd recommend that to anybody watching that's into animation, dig that book up, because you got basic information by a master animator. We found that book and bought it, and we studied, poured it, used it as an example, and gradually mastered animation and miniature making.
It's absolutely wild, because as a kid in Russia, I also, obviously, Disney influenced kids around the world. And watching those Disney films, I also came to America and I studied here in School of Visual Arts, thinking that I would do animation professionally. That's what I studied there. But it's mind-boggling that your professional career is still going strong after 6 decades of creating art, and you've created anything from Lord of the Rings calendars and the cards, Marvel and DC comics, Magic the Gathering, an album cover for a progressive rock band, right? The
Black Sabbath.
Black Sabbath and Sonata Arctic, I believe, right? That's the one.
Well, yeah, the Black Sabbath was Mob Rules, but I mean, I've been doing work for the Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Trans-Siberian Orchestra, that's the one, yeah.
That's the one for the last, what is it, Gene? 18 years or so.
Yeah.
Gene's right here. We've been working. Gene, we both work together, and she designs the program, and I've been doing the art. Still done. We just did it for this year's tour, which is on now, of course, with great difficulty with COVID, but nonetheless, they are touring right now. Yeah, and that's an incredible experience.
My question to you was that, the reason that I bring all of this up is that I don't want you to pick favorites. It's a kind of childish, question to ask, hey, what's your favorite? But what was one intellectual property that really truly brought joy to you and activated all of your creative forces, and you just were delighted in working with that?
Many of them, almost all of them do. I mean, certainly the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, because that was a fantasy of mine after I saw Fantasia and other films by, you talk about Russians, Prokofiev and Eisenstein, Sergei Eisenstein and Prokofiev, when they did Alexander Nevsky and Ivan the Terrible, which were
very... They're two great classics,
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But they would work together. I remember finding a book on the creation of Ivan the Terrible, Ivan the Terrible, on how they worked together, the composer and the filmmaker, the artist, because Eisenstein designed all his sets and his costumes and everything, and he'd work with Prokofiev how to structure music to go with the visuals. And I always had this obsession then to finally work with the composer, which I got to do with Paul O'Neill, who was the originator and creator of the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Paul died 3 years ago, but we worked together very tightly on designing images and music together. So that was a fantastic high point. But Jean had a publishing company for 14 years, where my wife now, and she was my business manager and still is, she had a publishing company she created that we would then cherry pick all the classic literature, children's literature that was in public domain that we could just do. So we started with, in her publishing company, we started with The Wizard of Oz, the very first print. And that these books were incredible to do for me. I mean, I was totally because you're taking these classic texts, Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland. How are you going to approach it? What's going to be your take on this? So you're bringing all your experiences and your originality to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was huge. It moves down the line. The Lord of the Rings became, I'd say, the next huge thing I would put on my list in terms of the turn on and excitability. Because again, I was only going by Tolkien's text. There wasn't any visual material.
Nothing was visualized, right? And it's Sorry. It's when I was studying animation, and then of course you have to take fine art classes, then like figure drawing. I've drawn for over 10 years, public schools and then in private college, and there's almost was like this very, very strange and weird distinction between the fine art, and the illustrators. Like illustrators almost looked upon like, oh, they're just artisans. What I wanted to ask you, which me as an admirer of illustrator art form, illustrators have been some of the most impactful modern artists of 20th century. We had Frank Frazetta, we had Larry Elmore, Alberto Vargas, Julie Bell, and you name it. There's thousands of them. I wanted to know which ones of those peers, really, because many of them you worked alongside with. Which were your personal favorite that you admired their art as well?
Well, my God, I mean, there's so many artists, I can't even begin to name them. And you're talking, you hit a key subject there that really is near and dear to my heart.
Which one?
The idea that somehow illustration is less than fine art. That that conversation has infuriated me since I became aware of that conversation. I was never aware of it as a kid. You're obsessed and you're driven. And to me, the very idea that you would say that this is less than, it's like a caste system. Yeah. It really is it's a ridiculous caste system in the art world. In the bottom of the barrel, the most viewed, spit upon were the comic artists. The comic artists, of the 1940s, they would go to a party and they would never, somebody would ask them, what do you do? They would never say, I'm a comic book artist. Yeah. They were ashamed. They were so demeaned. And if you look at old movies, some of the old movies, when they want to show kind of like the dumb guy, the stupid guy, they have him sitting there reading a comic book. Right? Wow. And then always that phrase, oh, it's merely an illustration.
It's cheap entertainment. Yeah.
It's merely an illustration. What a bunch of crap. I mean, there's a need for people to power structure, to say this is at the top and this is at the bottom. But that's infuriating.
It's all different appeal. And, also when I started studying, the pinup art, I was fascinated. And funny enough, when I was a kid, 8 or 9 years old, my dad bought me a calendar of Boris Vallejo, and there's a lot of sexual imagery there. And my father was like, let the kid explore, let him figure out what this whole thing is, And it's, pinup art is also, I know it's a near and dear topic to you because you're, you represent that era of the classic period of pinup art because you bring that old school traditional vibe to it. When I looked at your paintings, but just before we started recording this, I told you that I was looking at the Russians attack thing on the bomber that you've painted, and also the lady in red with the stockings. It is magnificent. What is the appeal of pinup art, even in today's world where we're oversaturated with content?
I think it's a nostalgic quality. I mean, my pinups, again, I said to Jean again because we worked together. I said, Jean, when was this? Like 1999. I want to do some pinup art. Now she's 14 years younger than me. So she has a different experience there. I grew up on my grandfather had all the Vargas and Gil Elvgren calendars in the basement. Esquire magazine with all the Vargas stuff and the Petty, George Petty, Alberto Vargas, and Elvgren and Zoe Mozart, one of the great female pinup painters. She was incredible, and she, she did movie posters like The Outlaw, did the Jane Russell Outlaw movie by Howard Hughes. She did that magnificent painting. Well, I remember that stuff as a kid. You're a young boy, and first of all, of course, you're turned on because all these beautiful girls. But I mean, I remember being totally aware of the painting style of these artists also, because you're looking at it as an artist from various different levels. And now when I started mine, I went through a whole thing with Jean. What should we do? She said, well, stick to, I was going through this thing. Well, I mean, coming out of the fact that I was well known for fantasy, the
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings and warrior maidens and all that, I said, no, I don't want to do that. That's like, I don't want to do that. I approached it very kind of like, well, what should we do? She said, what did you say? She said, make it a film noirish. The kind of,
right.
I said, yeah, that's exactly it. So then I painted the first one, and I got a big show in Manhattan. Lou Mizell, the Great American Pinup Gallery, he gave me my first show. So now, in a way, all that whole gallery scene world that I grew up with, and said the galleries are the top, and you guys doing pinup art is at the bottom somehow. Now I'm in New York at a major gallery show with pinup art.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, what you asked is, I decided to go into the stuff that I remember, not with the idea that I was going to copy Gil Elfgren, say, to copy his style or anything. Right. I looked at the old stuff to be inspired by it, to keep the spirit of it.
Right.
Not the exact imitation of it.
Right.
Because I wanted it to be like more or less like now, looking back then.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense because, all art comes from somewhere. And I was, some of the best professors that I had in both, private and public colleges were telling me that, look, don't be afraid to borrow. And once your own sensibilities come through, you will know when to break the rules sort of in a way and kind of adhere, kind of like harken back to the past, but develop your own visual language and your own style.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's just by keeping on the road and the path that eventually emerges.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I tell young people, gobble it all up. Look at everything and everybody and imitate, if you will, to learn from them all. Yeah. And then gradually all that'll merge in yourself and your own person, your own style will come out of that, But it's like you are what you eat. So make sure you're looking at the good stuff.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Mr. Greg, let's turn the page now and turn to the topic that is really near and dear to my heart, even though I'm like in Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering, all of that stuff that you've worked at, the Star Wars. And what I wanted to begin with, once the Century Fox approached you with painting that first promo poster, how much direction did they really give you? And what did you personally intend to convey in that poster?
Well, the direction, like I said before, that we got was the director wants the poster to look comic booky. That was the directive. Now, what I got from it was like I say, more color, more intense contrast from the Tom Young poster. And Tim and I went back to my studio, and we worked around the clock. We did that painting in 36 hours because the film was coming out in a week. They needed it real fast because they needed it for advertising purposes. So there was something, it was like you're working at breakneck speed. And I think there's something that happens with that, with the energy that you're exerting, as opposed to if you had like 2 weeks to do it. You take your time. Here, it's busting out. And I think for me, that discovery of the extreme contrast with that painting, I'm talking about color and light now, was the first time that I really done that kind of extreme color contrast.
Yeah.
That really was something that I learned in the process of painting that poster. It's like each job you do, each picture you paint, you learn something, and that one really turned me on. And I was trying to convey a spirit of action and adventure, romance, if you will, with the two figures in the foreground, which are already in Tom Young's poster. But again, his figures, especially the girl, were more subtle, even though she had the torn skirt. And it was kind of funny because we're at the ad agency in Manhattan, 20th Century Fox's agency, and they're showing us all the pictures of Carrie Fisher. I didn't know who these people were. They didn't.
They were beginner actors, right?
they were beginner actors.
Yeah.
They told us, and I'm saying, I'm looking, Tim and I are already thinking, well, he's holding the sword up. So we're already thinking, we know our light source is going to be that sword coming down from the top, that Frank Frazetta lighting, where it's coming, boom. Yeah. And so it's coming from the sword. And I'm looking through all they had a bunch of black and white, 8x10 glossy film from the film.
Yeah.
And we're looking for pictures of Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher, even though I didn't know their names yet. But we're looking for something that has that same angle of the head that we needed and the same lighting. And of course, there's nothing there. It was all different lighting. And when you need reference for a likeness, I need to have the exact lighting on it because that's giving you all your structure,
right?
Which is going to be the likeness of the person. So, but they said, I said, I can't find it here that's going to be the lighting. And they said, don't worry about it. They're not known. Don't worry about the likeness. Nobody knows who these people are. So that's why when you look at our poster, the actual likeness is not really that accurate to the people. And then when I finally met Carrie, I met her, right? She was just getting ready to go on tour. And I met Ed Summers, who owns Super Snake Comic Galleries downtown Manhattan, one of the greatest comic stores and galleries on the planet.
Yeah.
And Ed was a historian. Ed's the one that cleared up all the rights on the Schwarzenegger Conan film and got that off the ground. This guy. And he knew Carrie Fisher, so he took us down to her apartment. She was having a party. She was packing with a whole crowd of people. And she came up to us and said, "You made me much better looking than I am."
Well, she was a lovely young
woman. Yeah.
And it's interesting when I was growing up with the sci-fi fantasy books that were published in 70s and 80s and 90s, to me it was always an added feature of the artwork when it doesn't necessarily portray exactly what the book is telling you or what the movie is showing you. It kind of gives you an artist's personal interpretation of what this story is going to be. And to me, it only adds to the overall piece. So my next question is, so here you are, you and your brother, you guys are working at breakneck speed, trying to produce this piece of art, which ends up being one of the most recognizable pieces in Star Wars franchise, period. So, and after this, it's all said and done. The fire is gone, right? You finally get to breathe out. And then you probably go and watch the movie. Like, did it stick to like your own standards? That like, did you feel like you relayed the message of the film well?
I love the film, of course. I mean, who didn't, right? I mean, the thing was, though, I mean, that's a great question. I kept looking, because I established that very warm light with the sword. I kept waiting, even though that had nothing to do with any reference that they gave us, because all we had was black and white photographs to go by.
Yeah.
And I thought I was anticipating that, but the film was lit very much with white light for the most part, in a sense. There was not that. I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. I thought I conveyed the fantasy aspect in the poster for sure. But again, we have to always say this was Tom Young's composition, so his setup is all his. What we did, what we brought to it was the color. I think the color and the contrast, the color and contrast. Now look, I love the movie. I mean, all those first three, they were fantastic, and I got very friendly with John Dykstra, who was the original ILM. He did the first film. He's the guy that developed the Dykstra Flex camera, the computer camera that now mushroomed into the whole industry.
That was able to track and pan right and do all those complex shots.
Yes. So we finished the poster, and I was pursuing Urshrak, my own fantasy novel, and we went to Hollywood for the release of the book at the American Booksellers Association, and we got a meeting with John Dykstra in Van Nuys. Now he was working on Battlestar Galactica for television,
the original show, right?
The original Battlestar Galactica, and we met with him and his whole crew, and he pitched in. He wanted to do the special effects for our novel, Urshrak. He liked our pitch, our presentation, and we became very friendly with him and saw firsthand the whole setup, the whole computerized camera, which was like amazing to me. It was a hell of an experience, fantastic. And I know then he had a separation from George Lucas and everything. I don't think about all that. That's all their business, not mine. Right. And but as far as Star Wars was concerned, we got swept up into the mania. I mean, this is before your time, right? How old were you when that movie came out?
I was born in '81, so it's 4 years before.
Yeah,
I saw them all
now,
as a kid.
You have to remember
like
the time. It was Star Wars coming out was like almost equivalent to BC and AD. I'm not kidding you.
That's interesting.
In the pop culture world and bigger than the pop, it was like this wham, this division.
Yeah.
There was before Star Wars, now
Yeah.
there's after Star Wars.
Mhm.
I mean, that was it.
And
The world went crazy for the movie. And I saw people coming together. I grew up here, like I say, I experienced the 60s and the polarization in this country, America, and
Yeah.
globally, really,
Yeah.
of the war in Vietnam. And, you know, I mean, when that movie came out, all those people that were on opposite sides were sitting next to each other watching that movie.
That's
It had
fantastic.
this kind of like pulling the two sides together,
Yeah.
kind of like
Art really has the power to do that, and I will always be a proponent of illustration and film art where, you know, when something is this good, whether it's on the surface or deeply layered, it has nothing to do with academia or the elite circles.
No,
When the public responds to something with a simple eye and looks at it and appreciates it, you've caught a genie in the bottle, you know. And I wanted to continue that conversation with obviously the Shadows of the Empire, which you and your brother have worked on. You know, it was an entire publishing campaign from Lucasfilm. How did that come about? What was your involvement with that? Because those cards, once again, in my eye, I did a short video that you have watched on my channel. It's like it has humble viewership, but I was stunned when I saw it. You know, how did this come about? How were you involved with it?
Well, I mean, Topps trading cards. Gene, who called it? I'm yelling to Gene. Ira Friedman from Topps Trading Cards called and wanted to know if Tim and I wanted to do a trading card set of the Shadows of the Empire.
Yeah.
It was to be everything except the movie. It was, you know, all and I said, absolutely. So that's how that began. And then we connected with Bob Woods, who from Star Wars, the whole Star Wars world, who managed us between Topps in the studio. So we went to San Francisco, and we went to the ranch, and we were introduced to.
You went to the ranch?
Yeah.
Wow.
We went to the ranch.
That's awesome.
I met everybody except George.
Yeah.
Still haven't met George. I've not met George. And they gave us the grand tour. It was incredible. We went into where all the special effects and miniatures, and I got to touch the Ark of the Covenant, you know, from
Indiana Jones, right? Yeah. Wow, that's awesome.
And talked with all the artists and all the top people, and it was a great experience. And then one of the people there, it could have been Bob Woods, I can't remember who exactly now, said that, because we're going to start to do the trading card set. Now I use models. I pose models in the right setups, in the right lighting conditions, in the right costumes. I didn't have any Star Wars costumes. I didn't have access to that. And excuse me, you know, I talk too much, and then my
no, trust me, I have to do the same. And
they suggested that there was a super fan that were in our area, lived here on the East Coast where we are, who had unlimited supply of costumes and props. This guy had collected. I mean, he had a half a dozen Stormtrooper costumes. He had Darth Vader. He had everything we needed, along with Dash Rendar, the new character that's in the book. They had prepared a costume there also. So Gene connected with this gentleman and his staff, and they came to our studio, brought all their stuff. They just loaded up. They brought tons of props and costumes and guns and masks and everything. Now, previous to that, though, Tim and I did all the layout. We laid out the whole card set, rough sketches. What was it? I think it was 100. I think it was something like that. Then those went to Topps and Lucas, and they approved them all and made any corrections or changes or additions or whatever.
Right.
After they approved those initial sketches, and all those initial sketches were done with no referencing. It was just done just to show you the setup and the composition and the action and what's going on in the scene. And then we moved towards all the props and reality of posing models that we photographed for a week, models, costumes, and spaceships and all kinds of things. And then we went ahead and did all the final layouts from all the referencing, got those approved by Topps and Lucasfilm, and then proceeded with the paintings. Now, there's always a deadline. I can't remember. The deadlines are generally very short.
Yeah, I imagine.
Right? And Tim and I, of course, been working together since very tiny. So we really we knew how to speed up and work a system. And also with Jane, who was working with us, also got everything organized so extremely well. She manages all.
Which is so important in the pipeline, right? You have to like set everything up and know exactly see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Oh, absolutely. Jean is the one that manages everything for me. She still does. She gets everything set up. She schedules me. She sets it all up. She makes sure all the people are contacted that need to be contacted. Everything is there when it needs to be there. And that's how it was with this. So we went ahead now, and we had a system of like how to mix color. I paint with acrylic paint, Tim and I both, and we paint with mixing the paint up on these aluminum sheets. I don't know if I got something.
Which I've seen in your videos, yeah.
Yeah, like this. You know, it's on an aluminum sheet. Right. And mix all the colors up from the highlight to the shadow color for everything in a painting that we're doing, skin color, hair color thing. And then, of course, the key issue for us also is what color is the light. If you notice all those cards particularly, we love colored light, especially in that kind of subject matter. So it's, you're proceeding as you light your models and your figures and your miniatures up. You want a blue light coming from the back and an orange light coming from the front. So we know all that stuff as we're photographing it. And when we start to paint now, we've got it all. By the time we get to the actual paintings, we've already thought of all of our light sources and what color all the light is. And we together, Tim and I, know when we say it's a moonlight color, we know exactly the color breakdown that we're going to use from the highlight to the shadow. Because we mix colors up in a sequence from the highlight, almost like an animation. Yeah. You do your extreme drawings, or your extreme color of the light, the extreme color of the shadow, the true color of the object in the middle, and then your breakdowns in between. Yeah, that's how we mix our paint. So that we evolved that method out of necessity, because the two of us, while we would paint together in the studio, like there would be a palette here in the middle, Tim would be there, I would be here, and we're painting like this. But then we had to have it set up so that Tim could take the palette home, or I could take it home. So we had to have that very precise mixture and balance and breakdown of colors. Yeah, it wasn't just all a scumbled up mess. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, just the logistics of it sounds like a nightmare. It's so exciting because when let's say an audience, me, a viewer, looks at these cards, it boggles your mind, and you raise the question: how did this come together? How did the artist figure out all the lights? Did he have reference? Yes or not? And I want to now shift just a tiny bit from Star Wars and ask the question about your art style, because the way that I was taught in film animation school is that a picture's worth 1,000 words. If you're able to tell your story in a single shot, then you have an effective movie or an animation. And when I look at the Shadow of the Empire cards, there's so much more than just mere illustrations. To me, they're stories that expand beyond the borders of your canvas, right? And the question is, what problem must an illustrator solve to spark the audience's mind and engage them in that story that expands beyond the borders of the art?
Well, the thing is that you're being. I always those cards, doing a series of cards like that for Lucas or for Marvel Comics. Particularly Shadows of the Empire, you're making a mini movie. Basically, it's like sequential art in a comic book. You're basically making a movie. Long shot, medium shot, close up. And I grew up in the world too of illustration of masters like Howard Pyle and N.C. Wyeth, and then down to Norman Rockwell, where you could take a Norman Rockwell painting and it tells a whole story within that one painting. And that's always something that always interested me is storytelling, to make the scene very clear of what's going on. Right. It has to be clear. But you bring to it other elements that pull the objective being to pull the viewer into the picture. That was always, the Howard Pyle approach, the great father of American illustration.
Yeah.
The objective was to have you enter the scene. And for me as an illustrator, it's about putting myself in the scene. It's like I put myself in the scene that I'm illustrating.
So it's not an entirely intellectual or rational process. You have to feel it.
Feel it.
Feel yourself in the scene. Okay.
Right. You're not looking at it like a two-dimensional border decoration. Don't get me wrong. Two-dimensional border decorations are magnificent and beautiful.
Yeah.
My approach is that, to me, it's a rectangle it's like Alice through the looking glass. You're stepping into this world.
Yeah.
So I put myself in that world. And in that, I think what you see and what people say is they feel like there's this whole scene and there's a whole story and this is real and it's a real place. So that's all part of it. But of course, there's all the pragmatics of what I would call good painting. That is to say, composition. You're very pragmatically aware of the placement of the objects within the picture plane. The picture plane being this rectangle or square. How do you position your primary center of interest? Where do you position that to grab the eye first? Point. So you target, right? Then you have all your secondary centers of interest that lead and surround and support that primary center of interest. It's the positioning of all these elements that's critical. When I talk to students or young people, that's number one, composition. Number one. Don't think about piddly details yet. Don't think about even accurate drawing. Get your composition set up. Now, the next step that's most important is good drawing.
Yeah.
Good, solid drawing. That if you, in this case, it's got in the Star Wars case, it's got to look like the characters. It has to be. They have to be well proportioned. Everything. Not only the characters, but the tables, and the chairs, and the clouds, and the rocks. Everything has to be well drawn. It has to register for what it is, and it has to look nice. That's number two. Third is lighting and color, because color is last because lighting affects color. What color is the light? That has all the impact in the world on what that scene is going to look like. How you position your lights. Top light, back light, edge light, low light, rim light, all that has a storytelling capability to it. That's as much as storytelling as the actual drawing or composition or subject, how you use your light.
Yeah.
And so that's all critical. Well, those are all the main stages for me. And I still do that. I approach it every picture that way.
Now that you bring it all together, like in a kind of package that, I study art, but somebody who is watching to this, podcast, and they're hearing you describe it, breaking it down into simple elements, now it's understandable when somebody looks at your piece, let's say The Return of Gandalf, one of the Lord of the Rings cards that you did. Guys, I encourage you to Google it right now. Return of Gandalf. You have Gandalf, this patriarch, this Moses-like figure standing on top of the mountain, and he's there to tell the adventurers what's the next stage of their journey is. It is so larger than life, and like you mentioned before, and thank you so much for breaking it down to me, even I get just overwhelmed sometimes. How do you conceptualize, how you bring it, all these elements together to make it so powerful?
Well, that one there, okay, that's one of my favorites too, is that there's Gandalf the White now. He's returned from the dead, so to speak. He's resurrected after he went down with Balrog. So he's like now supernatural in a way, even though he probably always was, but now even more so. So now when you read the Tolkien's text, he doesn't say anything about the light in that scene. He doesn't mention it at all. But Tim and I are there, and we're seeing this like it's very almost a religious scene or operatic. And it's like grand opera, and the rays of light. If you notice the scene, it's like
a shaft of light is coming this way.
Shafts of light coming down. That to me is so powerful when you use light, like shafts and rays. It elevates it to a kind of like a more supernatural level. Yet it's very naturalistic also. Because Tim and I, in approaching even the most fantastic fantasy art, we're trying to be true to nature. The way light works in nature, that's still there. But now you're souping it up even, and you're creating it, exaggerating it more. So with that scene, there you go. It's the lighting and it's the composition. If you take that setup, as you say, like Moses up on the rock, the way he's positioned to the right center is the primary center of interest where your eye goes to. Bam! It goes right there.
Right.
And then you shoot down to the three principles in front, to the left, to the left. And then the vertical trees give it that, quality of like almost religious spirituality kind of like thing. And that's
almost
what
like I felt they were almost like crosses upon a mountain or across upon which Christ was crucified.
Well, I mean, and that was Tolkien too. I mean,
Yeah.
he was a Catholic and a Christian, and he met with C.S. Lewis, and they had those discussions and everything. And he brought all that to it, that kind of like belief and system and everything, and only now, morphed into this phantasmagorical, imaginative world. And so, especially there's another scene that I really approached operatic and spiritual was the healing of Eowyn. And again, there's shafts of light.
Yeah.
And Strider, Aragorn's in the foreground, kneeling, and you almost have this kind of like you could hear the music behind the whole thing.
I was hearing like the 11th century monk chanting, and it almost felt like, right, she is like this. Again, she's a female, obviously, from a fantasy book, but she felt like the Christ figure, and he's there giving himself into this, right? It was such a spiritual feeling to that painting. I love it.
Well, that's the sense. I mean, and Tim and I, we had that upbringing too in terms of that kind of thinking in terms of spirituality, and so I knew that was Tolkien, and I knew that was who he was, and so you're trying to be true to what he was after as much as you. And I never met the man. He died before we did the calendars, but so we're trying to bring all that to it, plus the fantastic, just playful imagination of lots of the other stuff. And the action adventure aspect of it, harkening back to whatever, King Arthur or Robin Hood, you know what I'm saying? That's all there for me. That was all there for me. And, it was like, it was fantastic. It was a great experience.
Also, when I was a kid, I remember before I knew I wanted to do art, I felt, because, you're like 6, 7 years old, obviously you don't have any techniques, right? And you think, let me just start drawing something, and something will happen out of it. And then when you grow and you understand the theory and you understand technique, that an artist must also be a master of a medium that he's performing in. I wanted to ask this question, before you start putting paint on your canvas, like, if you will, please talk about the painting behind you, but what sort of preliminary work must happen? What kind of things that you do? You conceptualize a piece before even start strategizing on the actual canvas. What are you going to put down?
Well, here is the subject matter of Tarna, who is from the world of heavy metal magazine.
Right.
She was in the heavy metal movie of 1981.
I love it.
Everybody. I mean, that movie was mind altering for so many people, especially young guys back in the day.
Yeah.
And she's this grand, heroic, beautiful female figure. She doesn't say a word in her whole that ending sequence of the movie, which is, in my opinion, my personal favorite sequence in the whole film. Especially the figure of Tarna, who has been rotoscoped, which of course Max Fleischer, the Fleischer Studios came up with that, where you'd shoot a live model and then rear project it, and the animator would trace it, alter the shape,
and it looks lifelike.
Very lifelike, subtle movement, very realistic movement, beautifully done. And anyway, this is a heavy metal project I'm working on, which Gene, can I talk about this picture, about what it's for? And it's like, heavy metal is going to be, Gene and I have been working with them now very excitedly with this whole new group of people have taken over, that we're going to be reissuing the Tolkien calendars with their heavy metal imprint. So there'll be a bunch of design aspects to the calendar itself that will imply that world of heavy metal along with the world of Tolkien. And we talked about a centerfold painting for a new painting for the centerfold of this particular calendar, big wide painting, which is Tarna on her flying creature that she flies in on, battling with my creation of a Lord of the Rings villain. but it'll be nothing known, but
Okay.
something that I invent.
Okay.
She'll be ready to do combat with this guy who will be flying in on a dragon from the left. So that's what this painting is now. So that's a discussion that I'm having with Jean. That's the beginning phase of this. We're discussing it with Matt Medney of Heavy Metal Magazine, who's a genius and a fantastic creative person. And we're discussing this picture, and we kind of evolve it together, just the idea, the concept. My next thing is to do thumbnail sketches, just fast thumbnails, getting the composition down, and so I probably draw it a half dozen different ways. I mean, I don't start, sometimes I end up with the very first sketch that I drew. Sometimes I'll end up with the 50th sketch that I draw. Sometimes I've drawn a scene, sometimes 50 different ways. Wow. Just out of sheer, like, not so much that the first one I don't like. It's not like I don't like it or I don't think it works or anything. It's like, let me explore this thing. In other words, it's the kid having fun and going and playing in the backyard. You want to just play with it to see what you can do with it, and just have fun. Should she be coming in towards the camera? Should she be coming in from behind the camera? Just how is. Then it's like, well, no. So you're doing all these sketches, and of course, at the same time, you want the character to read properly, to register instantly who it is and what she's about. So this is the setup that I eventually came around with. And her sword, when she lifts it, it shoots lightning and everything. So the lighting again there's a two source. I'm thinking of the lighting while I'm doing the sketches. There's a low direct light coming 3/4 from the front that I wanted to keep warmer. There's a light source off camera over your left shoulder.
Right.
And then her sword's blasting all this lightning. So you get this whitish, purpley lightning glow that will be edge lighting her and the creature. And some of that will be hitting on the front of the bad guy. And he'll get real dark and silhouetted here. So he'll be, and I'm thinking, here's the other thing to think about in painting or composition or lighting: light against dark, dark against light.
The positive and negative space in between.
Right. How positioning a figure dark against the light part of the background, or the figure light against the dark part of the background. So I wanted her to be light against the dark part of the background, and him to be dark against the light part of the background, which again bespeaks the characters and who they are.
Right,
She's light, he's
good
dark.
versus evil. Yeah.
Good versus evil. So all that's in your head as my head as I'm laying the thing out. Those are the conversations that are going on in my head as I'm drawing. Finally, I end up with the final composition, show it to Matt at Heavy Metal and Jean. And first at Jean, she's the first to say yes, no, maybe, as far as I'm concerned. She's also the last word, because it's like people say, how do you know when a painting's done? When Jean says that's it right there. That's the bottom line. That's great. And that's a great thing, because you can go on forever, or you can not work on it long enough. Or Jean will come in and say, wait a minute. And then it's pragmatic, simple stuff. Wait a minute, that arm is a little too crooked. It's not, that kind of stuff. And so that's great. In any event, so we all approved the sketch, and then I got a model. I pose I know my lighting, so I get a model. I shot her in this pose. And as far as the creature is concerned, sometimes I've made quick clay structures so I get the lighting on them, right? Get it. And I didn't have to do that here. I have a bunch of different animal creatures that I just put and get them in the light, see what the hell it looks like. Where's the musculature look like? And then draw the thing out. He's already been designed, though. He was in the film, this guy, or female. I'm not sure what it is. And then I do that final layout, and it's approved, and from the models and all the my reference material. And then in this particular instance, what I do is I cut the canvas. There's a big sheet of canvas, which is the fine weave. It's a portrait level of Frederick's canvas. I paint the canvas all black. There's a white primer on the canvas, and I want to start on a real black background. So I put several layers of Mars black, very thin, so it doesn't get lumpy. And then I put a layer of dioxazine purple, which is an intensely deep purple. That's, in a sense, blacker than black, but it has a color to it still. And I paint the whole canvas black. Then I transfer my Xerox. Here's a blow up of the.
That's fascinating.
Blow up of my sketch. I take the sketch and blow it up, on the Xerox machine. Boom, boom, boom. Tape it in position. Stick a piece of transfer paper.
Yeah.
Underneath, and then with a ballpoint pen, just transfer the whole thing. You see?
When I looked at your piece when you were working Batman, and obviously you were also that dark color, which it almost felt like you're sculpting you're finding Batman from that darkness.
Exactly.
Because
you're right.
The parallel between drawing a piece and sculpting a figure, just like the ancient Greeks in the classical period, they would have to first draw their sculpture and then do it. That's what I felt your Batman work was like. You were finding him from the darkness. You were sculpting him.
Absolutely. You're right on with that, man. You're right on with that, man. That's exactly like what Michelangelo said when he's chiseling away on a block of marble. He's only revealing the image. It's already in the stone. That's the sense you have when you're painting on black. I have anyway.
Yeah.
That you get your sense, like if you got a black canvas like this and you've got your drawing transfer, just a thin line, you think, all right, the first thing I'm going to put down is the lightning. And when you paint that white lightning on that dark surface, boom, it's already lit.
You got it. Yeah.
It's lit. It's like turning a light on. You see? And so I'd say that 90%, 95% of the paintings I paint these days, I paint on a black canvas. Because much of them, like the Star Wars and much of the comic stuff that I do from Marvel, it's always, you want that, the darks are already there now. You know how dark it's, that's your darkest dark. And that gives you that sense, again, that you feel like you're lighting up the scene as you paint it. It's like you're turning all the lights on as you paint. And as you said, bringing it out, you're sculpting it. There's a sense of sculpting more that you have with painting on a dark surface. At least I do, So
yeah, absolutely. And it's where I wanted to continue is, once 6 decades after, and have accumulated this wealth of knowledge and wisdom, right? If you were to travel back and face yourself in the beginning of this journey, what would be one advice that you would give yourself, not as a person who lived a long and fruitful life, but as an artist? What tips would you give yourself?
To keep at it even longer than I did, even though I kept at it for like 20 hours a day. To stay with it even longer, to stay on it completely and do more as much as I've done. And I've done a lot of stuff since I was a kid. That's what I would do. And never, well, the main thing too is only listen to positive information. Don't ever listen to anybody that tells you you're never going to make it.
Yeah.
Get real or get positive, which fortunately my parents never did. But there were people who would, and don't listen to them. Just block that and tune that all out and stay on your straight and narrow.
Encouragement is so vital, in especially in your formative years, where even if you're not, nobody's good in the beginning. My anatomy professor told me, look, everybody has 1,000 crappy drawings in them. You just got to get them out of your system.
Exactly.
That's such a great advice. It's like you get good. Nobody's born with innate talent. You get to it. You might have a predisposition. You learn it.
You learn it. It's an obsession you have to keep. The main thing is don't ever stop. And that's what I would tell kids. Don't stop. I mean, there's a famous, beautiful quote that I like from Thomas Hart Benton, the American muralist. You know his work? He was incredible. He said, there's no such thing as failure in the pursuit of art. Merely to survive in that pursuit is a success. The only way an artist can personally fail is if they stop working.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
In other words, so don't ever stop to think that what you've just did is a piece of crap. And how, because we all been through that from the beginning when you're young, like you say, you're trying to figure it out. Oh, that's junk, that's crap. Because you look at Caravaggio and you see his magnificent lighting. I can't do that. No. Stay on the path. If you quit, that's failure. Staying on the path and not achieving it yet, that's a success. You're staying on the path and you're not there yet. So it's about staying on it and keep finding out things as you go. It's as simple as that. You're gathering information. I mean, pragmatically, right?
Yeah.
You're gathering information. Oh, what's that? Oh, stick that in your backpack. Oh, what's that? Stick that in yours. Stick that, right? And you pick it up. Finally, you pick it up.
Yeah.
The thing is not to stop doing that.
That's an awesome advice. Mr. Greg, before I ask you a final question, first of all, I wanted just to say huge thank you, not only as a Star Wars fan, but just as a young man who just admires your work, and you've given fans around the world so much. I mean, 6 decades of creativity, like of awesome talent. I just, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for sitting down to chat with me. Thank you so much for continuing to produce this wonderful work, and I wish you many more years of awesome stuff. Like,
thank you.
May
so
your
much.
Greatest piece be ahead of you. Okay.
That's exactly it right there.
And my question to you is, just wanted to circle back once again to Star Wars. Is today's Star Wars fandom, I feel like, reflects our modern state of culture, which is unfortunately very divided politically, ideologically. And when the government, when the higher ups get into your brain, unfortunately, that's when even families are not stable anymore. And that's unfortunate. And in the Star Wars fandom, especially after George Lucas, sold the franchise, fans are, oh, they should have done this and that. Everybody's a critic, everybody's an expert, and they're given this social media megaphone. Now everybody's opinion matters,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, just on a personal level, like, are you still a fan of Star Wars? Is there still
Absolutely.
stuff that you check out and enjoy? What did you feel about the new films or animations or anything like that?
Well, what I've seen, I've loved very much. I mean, it's all very, the people that work on this stuff now these days is so sophisticated and so complex and so beautifully done.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that there's a great amount of energy and excitement on the part of the creators themselves. So I love it all. I mean, let's be honest about it. The first big kick is the first movie.
Mm.
And sad to say, the kids now, the young people, look back at that and say, "Oh, that's so crude."
Yeah.
Like they're no. That's the beginning, and that was the technology of the time. Respect that, admire that, put that on a pedestal. That's a classic. Anything from the past that you think is not as good as what it is now, it is the technology and the knowledge of the time that they had, and that's what it ended up looking like. Admire that, respect that, don't put it down, don't put it aside. But people are continuing now in their own modern day technology, which is incredible. It blows me away with.
It's almost like magic, right?
It is, to me, it is like magic, because
It's
I
like
don't
magic.
understand. I don't understand that. You get me?
Yeah.
I'm very non-technological. I use a computer to find my reference. I can go to Google and find reference material. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So, I mean, but what they do in film is overwhelming.
Yeah.
I always, like, especially with the Star Wars stuff or any of the special effects movies these days, I met George Pal, my icon from my childhood. Destination Moon,
Mm-hmm.
When Worlds Collide, the masterpiece War of the Worlds, and then the Time Machine.
Yeah.
In the Circus of Dr. Lau, 7 Days of Dr. Lau.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom Thumb, I met him. He was a sweet, beautiful man. I pitched Urshrak at him, and he loved our pitch. I sit there in a movie theater, or I'm watching television, and I imagine myself with George Pal sitting there, a special effects genius of his era, and fantasy and science fiction genius of his era, watching this new technology. What would he do watching that? When he tried to do the flood scene of When Worlds Collide, New York Street, you had a matte job of black matte painting, and you could see the black edge on the water coming down the street. But that's what the optical printing limitations were. It was all optical printing. You can't move a camera. It has to be rigid. He's watching the flood scene from any one of these incredible flood scene destroying New York movies, and what his lid's gonna be blown off the top of his head. Right? Yeah. I mean, really, what the hell is going on? How is this done? That's how I am still.
Yeah,
I
that's
look at it,
wonderful.
it's like,
You know, when I was born in 81, right? And in Russia, I lived through the last wave of Soviet Union. And even though we didn't have licensed American VHS tapes, the Western cinema, we still grew up on it because we had pirated tapes.
yeah.
And my parents and my generation grew up on Ray Harryhausen's great
Oh,
epics, the
oh
Sinbad
yeah.
Adventures, the Clash
Oh
of
yeah.
Titans. And you know what's funny? Just to give you a little bit of hope is that I interact with teenagers on social media, on my Facebook group that I
Okay.
created for Star Wars, and these kids are rediscovering the great Harryhausen's work, and they understand that the artist who was limited by his medium was so genius and he was still so ahead of his time. They look on this stuff and they compare it to modern CGI saturated movies that are not good, and they say, no, 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 we want more of that stuff. They're
Fantastic. That's great to
recognized
hear.
genius, you know?
That's great to hear.
Yeah,
Because yeah, there's a personality, a personalism, and a handmade creative thing that comes through that. It's
yeah,
like a painting, a real painting, as opposed to a computerized painting.
yeah.
You know, it may be beautiful, no two ways about it, the computerized painting.
Mhm.
All the elements are right there, the composition, the lighting, everything, but there's something lacking. There's some human touch
The
that's
energy,
lacking.
I always make that argument as somebody who loves video games and CGI and digital art. I admire it. There's great,
Oh
immense
yeah,
talent involved with it, but there's this certain electricity that transfers through your hand onto the canvas. And what we see behind you, sir, computer cannot replicate. I'm sorry. No AI, not even 100 years in the future, you cannot replicate a human soul with a
I
computer.
hope not. That scene always, like hey, look, I'm all for technology. I just
Yeah.
did a thing for Steve Aoki, who is a digital DJ, a DJ, all electronic music
Hmm.
that he creates, and he loved my work, and heavy metal is doing a thing with him, and so they asked me to do a cover for him. Now I don't know if you know his comic Neon Future.
No.
It's beautifully done comic book that Steve has done. What it centers in is this pro technological futuristic world. It's an alternate reality in
Hmm.
the near future, and the anti-technology world. And this central figure, which is Steve has paraphrased himself and elevated himself to this philosophical level of this ninja type dude who's trying to unite these two worlds,
Hmm.
not be against them, but unite them. Let's get it together. I totally dig his point of view. It's like the Mandela's third path, Nelson Mandela's
Right,
third way.
right.
There's not just these two binaries, that this right wing, left wing shit. It's the uniting of everything to try to pull it together. So I just did a cover of him. I personally always had that kind of like negative thing in a way about technology, like going back to the classic mind-boggling film of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
Where do you remember the scene where the Dave the astronaut has been sketching?
Yeah.
He's drawing pictures on,
Yeah.
on the spaceship, and he takes it over to Hal, the computer, that red eye.
The little eye. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he's holding up the artwork to the screen, and Hal, the computer, saying, "You're getting better, Dave. Getting better." There's Hal assessing the human's drawing.
Yeah.
I thought, whoa.
It was mind
Kubrick
blowing.
and Kubrick and Clark were way ahead of their time. That movie came out in 1960, what, 68?
69, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I'm
Way
sorry.
ahead of their time.
Yeah.
Way ahead of their time. But there was, and I always had that kind of like Colossus the Forbin project. You remember that one where the Russian computer and the American computer unite and they say, put us together, and they take over the world?
Yeah.
I always kind of like, yeah, that's technology. We're heading in that direction. Well, all right. It's fun for science fiction. It's great for science fiction. I love it for science fiction. But I mean, I really don't believe that. You know what I'm saying? I really personally don't believe that. I think it's a great, fantastic thing where we're heading with all this technology. The thing is to keep the human side of it there too. Don't lose that.
As long as the technology works in service of humanity,
Exactly.
not the other way around, right?
Exactly.
Mr. Hildebrandt, go ahead. You wanted to add something.
No. That's fantastic. I had a great fun.
It's been an absolute delight, first of all, discover your work, and it's been an absolute delight of speaking to you. And I hope a lot of people get to see this. I'm going to try to push this video as hard as possible because
Fantastic.
my honest instinct was when I saw your work is that more people need to see this. You need no introduction. You're a legendary artist already.
Well,
Modern kids need to see more of your stuff. And I'm very grateful for all the work you've produced. If there is any message you want to say to modern fans, go ahead and please add that to your fans.
No, I just want to thank you for talking, and I really enjoyed very much being with you now.
Yeah.
And this was great. It was a great interview and a great discussion that we had. And I just want to say hi to everybody, and stay positive, and always keep thinking the good thoughts, and be kind.
And tell them your gallery.
And Jean's telling me to remind everybody of spiderweb art.
Yeah, we're definitely going to put all of the links. I'm going to put them right in this video. I'm going to embed it in the message of the video. Absolutely.
I said thank you.
Jean says thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean.
It's like we who are into fantasy and science fiction can really clearly see the good guys and the bad guys, and we all know that what that story is all about. But I'm saying we should not do that now with each other because of opposing views of either political or religious ideas. This is not something. This is a multiple universe. There's all kinds of ideas and views and conversations, and we got to come together and quit screaming and making fists at one another and talking hate.
Okay, great.
This has to stop.
Yeah, it's nothing heals the heart like art. It's a universal language.
Right. This film we just watched on the Prime. Jean's reminded me of where we watched Prime with Jane. What was the entire title again? We just watched this last night.
The Electrical Life of Louis
Wayne. The Electrical Life of Louis Wayne. Did you see this?
No, but I'm going to write it down.
Oh my God! Look at you talk about a film about an art based on a real person, a British illustrator. So it's an illustrator. I mean, I don't want to get into giving it away. The message of that film and what it ultimately has to say is so beautiful in terms of what art is and what art can do.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. It's amazing.
It's not on my watch list.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. Well, guys, here we go. This was the interview with Greg Hildebrandt, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. Please do me a favor. Go out, check out all of his links. He does amazing videos on YouTube where he actually produces his work. He has great conversations about art in general. If you're curious about this, if you're huge Lord of the Rings fans, I know you Star Wars fans are. If you're huge fans of Shadows of the Empire, please go ahead, check out Greg's links. I'm going to drop them all in this video description. As always, guys, I'm humbled and I'm happy that you're watching my videos and paying attention. And the message of this channel, the reason that I created was honestly just to be positive and enjoy it all and have a good time. I hope you support me in the future. Subscribe to this channel, hit the bell button. We'll see you guys next time. Greg, once again, thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thanks a lot, man. I really enjoyed this.
Take care, guys.
Bye, everybody.